Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Welcome to today's online class arranged by National University. I hope that you are keeping safe and sound by the grace of Almighty. And I also hope that you are being benefited by this online classroom. Today, I'm going to talk about Life of Cooley by Samuel Johnson. And this piece of literature is included in your syllabus, in your paper, 17th and 18th century non-fictional prose. So today, like all of my previous classes, I'm going to talk about your paper 17th and 18th century non-fictional prose. Before starting my class, I want to tell you that this piece of literature, Life of Cooley by Samuel Johnson, is a biography, and this is a piece of literature, and this is so significant because here Samuel Johnson is talking about a poet, Abraham Cooley, and at the same time he is talking about his writings, the genre, the characteristics of his writing, and also he's going to talk about the characteristics of some of the characteristics of writing of some of the remarkable poets in English literature. So before starting my class, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Shazda Akhtar Asma, lecturer, Department of English, Government Tolaram College, Narayanganj. Okay, so let's start my class. At first, I'm going to talk about Dr. Samuel Johnson. Who is Johnson? Johnson actually a remarkable, a significant critic in English literature. He was born on 18th September 1709. Okay, and the place of his birth was Lichfield, England. So he was an Englishman. And what was his profession? He was author, lexicographer, critic, journalist, and conversationalist. Okay, so he was a multi-talented person. And here I have also enlisted some of his major works in order to get you familiar with his works or with his biography. Some of his major works are The Life of Savage, Dictionary of the English Language, The Vanity of Human Wishes, Irene, Tatler, Spectator, Rambler, Journey to the Hebrides, The Lives of the Poets. Okay, and here the date of his death is 13th December 1784. Okay, so this is the biography of Dr. Samuel Johnson, who is the author of this literary piece. Okay, Life of Cooley. So here we are talking about the biography of the writer of this book. Now next, I'm going to talk about the biography of the characters of this book, of the major character of this book, Abraham Cooley. And here our Johnson, who the author of this book, talks about the life of Abraham Cooley in this book. So I hope you understand that the previous biography was the biography of the author, Dr. Samuel Johnson, and this biography is the biography of Abraham Cooley, the major or significant character of this book. Okay, so his date of birth is 1618. Okay, so he was senior to Johnson in age. The place of his birth was London, England, and alma mater means the educational institutions where he went to study is Trinity College under Cambridge University, and his major works are Ode on the Death of Mr. William Harvey, Constantia and Philetus, Love's Riddle, Carter of Coleman Street, The Mistress, The Miscellaneous, Davies, A Proposition for the Advancement of Experimental Philosophy, to the Royal Society. Okay, these are the major works of our Abraham Cowley. Next, we are going to talk about some of the common comments which some critics delivered, or some critics made about Abraham Cowley. So in the next section of this phase, we are going to talk about critics' comments about Abraham Cowley. So during his lifetime and throughout the Restoration, critics praised his ingenuity and eloquence. So he was praised for his ingenuity and his eloquence throughout the Restoration period of English literature, okay, by the critics. And next, what what has Milton said about our Cowley? We will learn about this here. Milton has said that Spenser, Shakespeare, and Cowley were England's three greatest poets. Okay, so our Milton compared or has considered Cowley as the greatest poets like Spenser or Shakespeare. Okay, so Cowley, according to Milton, Cowley is one of the greatest poets in English literature, and he is here ranked with Spenser and Shakespeare. Okay, so here we get a little glimpse, a small part of the biography of Abraham Cowley, who is the main character of this literary piece which we are going to talk about. And this literary piece is written by the greatest critic, lexicographer, Dr. Samuel Johnson, and we have also learned about his biography, his life a little bit in the previous phase. So next, we are going to know about a person, Dr. Spratt. Dr. Spratt was Cowley's friend, and he was also a biographer. And here, Samuel Johnson talks about this Dr. Spratt in this book, in this piece of literature, and here we are going to know what Dr. Johnson thinks about the biography by Dr. Spratt, about the biography of Abraham Cowley, which was written by Dr. Spratt. Our Samuel Johnson comments on that biography, and here in this part we are going to talk about this. So the title of this slide is Charge of Inaccuracy Johnson Brings Against Dr. Spratt. So I have already told you that Dr. Spratt was a biographer and was also a friend of Abraham Cowley, but was a poet, a writer. But our Johnson thinks that the biography of Dr. Spratt, or some parts of that biography, were incorrect. Okay, so here in this part we are going to talk about this. Dr. Spratt was Cowley's friend and biographer. As a biographer of Abraham Cowley, Johnson has collected information from this biography of Cowley written by Dr. Spratt. So our Johnson has collected or has read this book and has collected information from this biography of Cowley, which was written by Dr. Spratt. And here, Johnson praised Dr. Spratt for placing Cowley high in the ranks of literature, but at the same time criticized for inaccuracy in his details. So our Johnson thinks that Dr. Spratt did the right thing, ranking or placing Cowley high in ranks in English literature, but at the same time, he also criticized Dr. Spratt's biography because he thinks some of the details about Abraham Cowley, which Dr. Spratt has written in his biography about Cowley, were not correct. Okay, this is our Johnson's thought, that Dr. Spratt's information about Cowley in his biography of Cowley were not correct. Okay, so Johnson also accused that Dr. Spur's sense of friendship and literary ambition have made Cowley's biography a funeral oration. So our Johnson wants to say that Dr. Spur's sense of friendship with Cowley or his literary ambition was a barrier to present the biography of Cowley in a correct order or correctly. Okay, so our Johnson wants to say that Dr. Spratt presents the life of Cowley um, in a wrong way, not in a correct way, and Dr. Spratt provides wrong information about the life of Cowley. So next, we can't get clear information about his life, and confusion arises through the obscurity of extravagant praise. So sometimes Dr. Spratt provides wrong information about the life of Cowley, and sometimes he showered extravagant or false praise about Cowley, for which his biography of Cowley becomes obscure, and we can't get clear information about the life of Cowley from the biography of Dr. Spratt. Okay, from the biography of Cowley, which was written by Dr. Spratt. Okay, I hope that you have understand. Here we have talked about three persons. One is Dr. Samuel Johnson, who is the author, biographer, and critic, and he is the biographer of this book about Cowley, about Abraham Cowley, a remarkable poet in English literature. Next, we talked about the life of Abraham Cowley, who is the main character, the significant character in this literary piece, Life of Cowley. And now, here, we have talked about another person, Dr. Spratt, who was a friend of Abraham Cowley, and at the same time, who was a biographer of Abraham Cowley. Okay, so till now we have talked about three persons. All of them were remarkable in English literature, and in my next slides, in the next pages, I'm going to talk about some more personalities, some more important topics, important information about English literature. Okay, so next here we will learn about the book which inspired Cowley in his early childhood. You know, especially in the life of a young person or in the life of any person, movie or book or any piece of art has a great inspiration or has a great influence. Okay, so here this is our Abraham Cowley is not an exception. There is a book which had great influence, which had a great influence in his life. Okay, so here we are going to know the name of the book. Okay, so Johnson says that Cowley was inspired by the Fairy Queen, written by Spenser. You all know that. I think the Fairy Queen is included in your syllabus. So the Fairy Queen is the name of the book which inspired Cowley most during his childhood, and this Fairy Queen was written by Spenser in his okay. So the trace of this inspiration can be found in his long epic poem Davidis. So Davidis is the name of the long epic poem written by our Cowley. So when we go through this poem, this epic poem, we can understand that this epic poem was inspired by the Fairy Queen written by Spenser. So this is a hint that our Cowley was greatly influenced by the Fairy Queen written by Spenser. Okay, so which was planned to be completed in 12 books as Spenser's wanted for the Fairy Queen. So Spenser wanted to complete his book, The Fairy Queen, in 12 books. 12 books means, okay, in 12 books, you can understand. So, in the same way, our colleague wanted to completed his book was debuted in 12 books. Spencer's stanchic form adds the final Alexandrine to produce the 9-lined Spencerian stanza. Here, our Johnson is talking about the rhyme or the structure of the poem of, or of the epic poem of Davidis. Our colleague wanted to complete his wanted to write down his epic poem Davidis in the same way, in the same style, in the same rhythm, in the same stanza, in the same structure as Spencer has written his epics. Okay. Next, Fairy Queen, along with such masterly techniques, became a source of delight as well as provided him with necessary instruction. So the Fairy Queen did not only provide a kind of inspiration, delight, or pleasure to our colleague, but at the same time, it also provides instruction, necessary instruction or guidelines to write down an epic. Okay, so here actually now we are talking about the book Life of Coley. Here Johnson, as Johnson is the biographer, and in this book he talks about the life of Abraham Coley. At first he talks about the book which inspired Abraham Coley during his childhood to be a writer. Next, here Johnson gives a review of Coley's book The Mistress. The Mistress, a series of love poems written by Coley, was published in 1647. This collection is influenced by poems of Donne and reflects the contemporary fashion for amorous lyric replied with paradox, hyperbole, and extended concepts. We'll talk about all these things, paradox, hyperbole, and concept in the next pages. But here our Johnson says that Colley's book, The Mistresses, is a series of love poems, and this book was published in 1647. And our Colley was influenced by the poems of John Donne. You know, John Donne was the remarkable poet of metaphysical poetry. So we can clearly understand that Colley was influenced by the poems of metaphysical poets, especially the greatest metaphysical poet, John Donne. Okay, so and like the metaphysical poets, our Colley also used a lot of paradox, hyperbole, and extended concepts in his love poems. Dr. Johnson traces its origin in Italian poetry. Poets should be obliged to be true to love. Johnson believes this obligation to love songs owes its origin in fame of Petrarch's verse. So here, our Johnson talks about love poems, how love poems should be. He thinks that love poems should be like the love poems of Petrarch. Petrarch was the remarkable Italian poet who introduced Italian sonnet. So here he thinks that even Colley's love poems have their origin in the love poems of Petrarch. Okay, here Johnson says that real love has a psychological role in writing love poetry. Only imagination is not enough to compose love poetry. The taste of real life love is also important. So here Johnson offers his opinion about love poems, how love poems should be, or how love poems should be written. So our Johnson says that in order to write down love poems, poets should have real life love experience. Only imagination is not enough to write down love poems. This is the thought of our Johnson. Next, Johnson says there was absence of real feelings of love in Coley, and it affects his poems and explains the possible reason for his use of exaggerated metaphysical weight. So our Johnson here finds fault in the love poems of Colley. He thinks that Colley lacks the real feelings in love. For this reason, he could not present love in his poems, not in a realistic way. Moreover, um, he uses exaggerated metaphysical weight, for which his love poems were not up to mark. This is the thought of our Johnson about the love poems of our Colley. Okay, next, again, our Johnson here expresses his attitude towards love poems like Colley. Okay, so here Colley is considered as a love poet, but at the same time, Johnson here shows or expresses his attitude towards love poets like Colley. So let's know what our Johnson says about love poets like Colley. Okay, Johnson shows his admiration for Petrarch, an Italian poet who, with his manners of the literate world, and filled Europe with love and poetry by his melodious homage to his Laura, a celebrated character in his love poetry. So Petrarch has had a real life love experience for which our Johnson thinks that his love poems were lively, okay, were real. The love poems of metaphysical poets, especially of Colley, should be just in comparison to Petrarch's verse. So our Johnson wants to compare the love poems of Colley with the love poems of Petrarch. Okay, Johnson suggests that love poems should contain genuine feelings of love that has its origin in real passion of love. He considers Petrarch a real lover who showed his tenderness towards Laura. So in his love poems, our Petrarch, the greatest Italian poet, shows or expressed his love towards Laura, okay, his real life love. So he thinks that all the love poets should have this kind of real feelings like Petrarch. Okay. Here we are getting important information about Colley, and at the same time we are also getting some important information about different genre of poetry or different aspects of English literature. Okay, next, Johnson defends Colley's negligence in his loyalty to the realist. Okay, so here we can get the hints that Colley once showed negligence to the realists. Okay, so it was a kind of crime during that time, showing negligence to the realist. Okay, so what did happen? What happened? We will learn about this here. It is not something wrong with a person who does not share secrets with the parliamentary force or does not assist them by intelligence or any other act. So here we can understand that the parliamentary force or the royals or the different law enforcement party of the then Britain tried to get some information from Abraham Colley about some person, but Colley did not provide that information to that law enforcement party. So it was a problem. It was a kind of crime, and it raised protest or many more complication. And after a certain period of time, Abraham Colley was arrested. Okay, so here our Johnson defends Colley's activities. It is not unlawful for a man to remain neutral in the honor of the person who freed him from jail. So it is clear, it can be understood here that Colley was asked information about a person to whom he was grateful. Okay, so for this reason, Foley did not deliver that information to the law enforcement party. For this reason, it raised a kind of protest, criticism, many more things. But Johnson here defends the activities, the action of Foley. He thinks that Collins did the right thing. Um, he did not provide information about that person who once helped him to be free from the jail. Okay, so here we get some personal information. We get a picture, a real picture of his personal life from this part of Collins' life. Next, here Johnson shows his attitude towards metaphysical poets. He says that Johnson appreciates the witticism of metaphysical poets, and he thinks in their witticism they try to show their talent. So our metaphysical poets try to show their witticism in their writings, and Johnson thinks that by showing or by presenting their witticism, actually the metaphysical poets try to show their talent. Johnson differentiates between writing verse and writing poetry. Writing verse concerns with technical perfection. Poetry must contain great thoughts. Verse can be technically perfect, but poetry must go a step further, faithfully reflecting the unchanging human nature with a concern for moral instruction. Being men of learning, metaphysical poets tried to show their talent, but unluckily expressing it in rhyme instead of writing poetry. They only wrote verses. So our Johnson here draws a comparison between verse and poetry. Here Johnson says that um, in verse technical perfection is emphasized, but in poetry a great thoughts should be presented. So metaphysical poets did not write in poetry. According to Johnson, all those writings of metaphysical poets are verse because they are technically perfect, but they did not provide any great thought in front of the readers. Okay, so the poems of metaphysical poets are verse. They are not poetry. This is the thought of our Johnson. Next, again, here in this part, we will also talk about the writings of metaphysical poets. Very often, they wrote such verses that were technically perfect, but they did not produce good sound effect because the change of sounds was so imperfect that were only found to be verses by counting the syllables. Thus, the metaphysical poets stood the trial of the finger better than of the ear. So here, our Johnson wants to say that metaphysical poets try to show all their talent, try to make their verses technically perfect, but they did not produce any good effect, any standard effect of sounds in their rhymes. So for this reason, they are not good to listen. Okay. As a neoclassicist, Johnson believed in Aristotle's theory of writing poetry, that poetry is an imitative art. Okay. Johnson thinks that good poetry should faithfully reflect the unchanging human nature with a concern for moral instruction, for guidance in how best to live. According to Johnson, the metaphysical poets neither copied nature nor life, neither painted the forms of matter nor represented the operations of intellect. According to Johnson, the metaphysical poets did not copy nature, and therefore they could not be termed poets, rather they should be termed wits. So here what our Johnson wants to say that metaphysical poets did not present life or the natural or real part of life in their poems. They did not deal with, as he said in the, as I talk about in my previous slide, that the metaphysical poet did not provide any great thoughts in their poem, in their writings. For this reason, their writings are verse, not poem. So here our Johnson indirectly says the same thing, that the metaphysical poets did not present life or natural, natural part, real part of life in their poems. So they did not follow Aristotle theory of writing poetry, that poetry is an imitative art. Poetry should copy or should present life in front of the readers. Okay. Here again, our Johnson says the metaphysical poets have failed to attain sublimity in art or excellence in art. Their poetry do not even create pity or sympathy, as they never try to understand the greatness of thought which at once fills the whole mind. So this is the same thing which our Johnson wants to say over and over, that the metaphysical poets failed to present great thoughts in their writings. For this reason, their poetry lacked sublimity or excellence. Okay, the readers have to think frequently and retract their previous knowledge or examine something new. This appeal to intellect and greatness of thought seldom elevates one's mind, but their acuteness often surprises. The readers have to think frequently and retract their previous knowledge or examine something new. This appeal to intellect and greatness of thought seldom elevates one's mind, but the acuteness of surprise. So, as the here the Johnson wants to say that as the metaphysical poets always try to be technically perfect, they always present something new in their writings. For this reason, their writings always surprises the readers, but they did not fill the mind of readers with great thought. Okay. Although their works cannot always gratify imagination, they can at least employ the powers of reflection and comparison. So sometimes the writings of metaphysical poets sometimes were able to reflect some part of nature, some part of life, or something, okay, or sometimes their writings, the writings of metaphysical poets, were able to draw comparison, or to make comparison between things. Next, here our Johnson talk about the witticism of metaphysical poets. So, what does our Johnson say? Johnson said that the metaphysical poets tried hard to be exceptional and never attained the status of wit, and were careless of their choice of words. So here our Johnson wants to say that metaphysical poets uh, always try to be exceptional in presenting or in writing their poems, but they never attain the status of wit. Even they were careless in choosing the words of their poems. So here our Johnson gives a definition of wit. He says that wit may be more strictly and philosophically considered a kind of harmonious discord, a combination of dissimilar images. Just focus on this. According to Johnson, wit is a combination of dissimilar images or discovery of hidden similarities in things clearly dissimilar. So apparently, there would be dissimilar between things, but there would be hidden similarities between those things. On the surface, you will find that those things are dissimilar from each other, but under surface, there would be some similarity between them. Here, the most unrelated ideas are joined together by force, and Johnson thinks that this is the nature of metaphysical poets' wit. Okay, so Johnson thinks that wit should reflect reason and balance. It should also be natural, but the wits in metaphysical poems are not natural and successful. Okay, so my dear students, here our Johnson wants to say that which should reflect reason and balance. It should also be natural. It should not be unnatural. It should be natural, successful in producing feelings or emotional reaction in reader's mind. Okay, so they also says that the metaphysical poets always want to invent some new, unexpected, uncommon, and surprising wit. So he thinks that all metaphysical poets always wanted to present something new, surprising, as they have always tried to be exceptional, uncommon. So their wits were sometimes uncommon, exceptional, absurd, but it was not always. The readers did not always, or the readers do not always understand their wit. This is the fault in their witticism. As I said that in this book, you will learn about many aspects of English literature. Here we talk about metaphysical part. So thank you all. We'll talk in my next class. Okay.